Hello, everybody. Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started. I wanted to let you guys know that if you can join me in the Google Plus application that we have for watching this Hangout on air, then you'll be able to submit your Q&A questions, and then I'll be able to look at them and answer them as they come up. If you can't find the application or you don't have a Google account, then simply email me any questions that come up during this training, and I will get back to you as best I can. And again, my email is weldon at mindgames.gg, Weldon at mindgames.gg. So I want to get through the first 30 minutes of this training really fast and just share with you what I wanted to talk about today so that we can go ahead and get to your questions. But go ahead and start submitting them now. If you want to use the Q&A application in the Google Hangouts, it'll send them to me, and then I can click on them and answer them. So let me start by introducing myself. I'm a sports psych trainer. I'm an American. I live in Finland, and my goal as in esport is to do the same thing that I do in traditional sport. So I coach swimmers and I coach football players, and my goal is to take them into the mindset of being an athlete. And so in esport, just like in athletics, the performance psychology is the same. You go from video game player to athlete, and the mindset change is the key. So people ask me, like, what do we do with sports psychology? How does it work? And they have a lot of preconceptions and funny ideas. So, for example, here is one thing that people think that I do. So yes, we are going to talk about emotions, but it's not going to be like traditional psychology because we view emotions as tools, things that either hamper us or help us in our pursuit of our goals. Okay, and then some people also think that if I'm not going to be doing, mindset work or emotional work but through conversation, that I'm some sort of motivational speaker. But motivation alone is not enough. If you have an idiot and you motivate him, now you have a motivated idiot. So actually what I do is to educate people. I want to give you the tools to become a scientist of your own performance so that you can examine and look at how it is that you train and play so that you can take what I'm going to give you and go to the next level. My goal is always that the people that I'm training surpass me in understanding of how their mind works within their own body. So like right now, I might be the expert on how it is that you're performing mentally. But by the end of your career, you're going to be the expert on almost every facet of your mental performance. So let me quickly go over the agenda for today. The first thing we're going to talk about is why the question is irrelevant, that mindset is the answer. So just how important this mental skills training is. The second thing we're going to talk about is why you should change how you train, the power of practice, and the way that practice can kill you in your skill development, just really hamper you in your skill development if you train incorrectly. The third thing we're going to talk about is how elite skills are learned and why you need to be aware of this. So how does it function in the brain, and why does knowing that help you? And the fourth thing we're going to talk about 5 practical tips you can do today to improve your game. So let me get started. Number 1, the question is irrelevant. Mindset is the answer. So the thing I like to tell everybody is that this was discovered almost 50 years ago. There was research in sports psychology on talent detection. The Soviet Union had just become communist, and they wanted to just dominate in the Olympics. They wanted to prove that communism was the way. And so they invested tons of money into sports psychological research to try to find the next generation of athletes. And they collected information on all sorts of humans using all sorts of different styles of test, physical, mental, and everything. And then they also looked at their elite athletes. They said, which of these is going to become the champion? Which of these is, if we put money into, is going to become the gold medalist? And they found the same thing that scientists have been finding ever since, all the way up until 2004, when Erickson did a recent study where he repeated this kind of things and discovered the same result, that there is no talent to success. It's all about effort. Taking effort and turning it into smart actions. That is what causes elite performance. It happens over time. Usually people quote the 10,000 hours of training, and then you become an elite at whatever it is that you're training. So most athletes never get mental training until they are already professional, because the cost of hiring a sports psychologist is really high, but they get lots of mental maturity from all sorts of places. And so if you're working on your mindset, which, as I'm saying, is the key, you need to be able to take your effort, take your motivation, and turn it into action, smart action. So how do you do that by yourself without, a professional sports psych or coach? You have to surround yourself with a group of people. Okay, and here are the three most important people. Number one, people who can give you self-worth independent of your sport. After you have a bad game or a bad match, you have to be able to go and erase that from your memory without going back into the game. So most people have a bad game in solo queue, they go back and they re-queue into another game. What they should be doing is trying to live with the result of that bad game and go to people who value them independent of their sport, get their self-worth back up so they can focus back on the next match. Okay, number two, you need people who can counsel you about the skills you're learning. So almost all mental skills needed to succeed in esport are transferable skills used to succeed in all human performance. If you succeed in any measure, it's because you have developed those skills in yourself, so you can apply them to other areas of life as well. And the easiest way is by talking with a valued counselor or a mentor who can point out those attributes in which you excel. And the third thing is you need to find people who can talk to you about your dream goals, and you can talk to about your dream goals. I'll talk a lot more about this in point 3, so I'm going to skip it for now. Okay, so the next point, number 2, why you should change how you train, so the power of practice. Did you know that the human brain can only focus for so long in one day that it can only make a certain number of decisions? So there's this very interesting experiment where they took a bunch of lab students. These scientists performed an experiment on their own students. They brought in a bunch of stuff from a store, and they said, okay, at the end of this class you can have one of these free things, but first you got to ask a bunch of questions. I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions. Do you want a sweater or do you want pants? Do you want a red one or a blue one? Do you want a soft one or a hard one? Do you want, and they asked them all to catalog all of these categories that they were going to decide about the item that they wanted. And then at the end of the class, they did a test on focus. They had them hold their hands under ice water for a certain amount of time, for as long as they could, actually. And what they found was that all the people who had to make all these decisions during this hour, they couldn't hold their hand under as long as people who had made no decisions that whole hour. This test has been repeated over and over again in various different scenarios in different ways. And it looks like what we basically have is like hit points for the day in terms of decisions. Like, let's say you have 99 hit points for your day, though you have 99 decisions you can make. By the time you get to 0, you're done. Your training is going to be a waste of time after that. I mean, it's going to be very ineffective compared to before. So this is why you need to be training smart, because we are limited, just like in our muscle capacity, we're limited in our mental capacity for each day. You deplete those hit points until you can sleep again. So you have to train effectively in order to do better than other people. And I mean other people who are training efficiently or training too much. I don't want you to go out and try to be efficient in your training. Efficiency is useless. Why would you do things better that hardly matter? There's a lot of people that go out, they try to be efficient. They try to do everything that they can in less time. But half the time, the thing they're doing is pointless. Let me tell you a story how I subtracted 2 hours from my day and I got more done than before. So I moved to Finland recently, and I didn't have a car anymore. So I started walking. It's an hour walk from my house to my job. So I lost 2 extra hours every day. And before I was already overbooked, like overscheduled. But what happened was during those hours where I was walking, I was planning how to do what I needed to do more effectively. So when I got to work or I got back home, I did what I had to do smartly instead of quickly or by doing too much of it. And I actually started to get more done than before. So what about training overabundantly? Like somebody like Faker, who's a League of Legends professional, he trains like anywhere from 14 to 15 hours a day sometimes. That works fine at the start, but then you end up training bad habits. So let me show you a little graph here. This is elite performance. This is how you learn elite performance in the mind. The very first thing that you do is you start playing a new sport like League of Legends or StarCraft, and your abilities increase rapidly. So in 1 week of training, this blue area here, you're able to gain a lot of new skills in the game. Then you start to cap out, okay? So now your challenger tier, diamond tier, your high rank master in StarCraft 2, and you spend a week training, and that's up at this gold level up here, but look what happens. You gain very, very little in the terms of skill development because it's harder to gain those skills. What happens is those skills are encountered fewer and fewer between in every game. So let's say you go into a game and you've never played the game before. So you're learning every second. You're like, oh my gosh, so this button does this. This is what I should buy. This character, is going to kill me now because my health is too low. And then when you're an elite player, 90% of the game, you're on autopilot. You log in, you load, you buy your items, you walk to lane. You're not training. That's stuff you can already do. So you get very little effective training in each game. Maybe you have a couple exchanges every match. So if you know this, you can plan better how to encounter those points of the game that you haven't mastered yet. Like, what is it that you're bad at? That's the thing that you need to be training. A lot of people go into League of Legends to have fun. That's totally fine. But usually people have fun doing stuff that they're good at. When you're training, you want to be doing stuff you're not good at. Okay, I'm going to move on so we can get to the Q&As and I can answer your questions directly. And so I can turn my camera on. Okay, point number 3, how elite skills are learned, why you need to be aware of this. So the development of an elite mindset and skills is an upward spiral. Let me show you the steps. 1 second. Okay, so this is essentially what we're looking at in terms of skill development. You go around and around and around, and you slowly increment your abilities as you get higher and higher. And the cycle looks a little bit like this. You have a goal, you do some planning, you try it, you evaluate it, you adapt it, and then you increase it a little bit. So you do that over and over and over again as you're going upwards. Now, what they've discovered in research is that the more aware you are of your mental processes, your mindset, the easier it is for you to skip ahead. So like a lot of people do this spiral and they get stuck on one level. They can't increase. Or they get stuck on the planning or the doing. They just can't get over that step. This is what happens when you have reflection. You can jump over steps. You can go straight from planning. You can imagine how it would play out. You can adapt to it before you ever get to the doing phase. You don't have to keep trying everything. Like you can do the model in your mind. You don't have to be the scientist who goes into the field and experiments every single time to see if it's going to work. You can tell if it's going to work. because you know yourself and your mindset. So this is why a lot of the tips I'm going to give you today are related around becoming aware of your own limits and your own way of training and things like that, because reflection is so important as a mental skill for development. Let me go back to this slide for a sec. There's one more thing I want to talk about elite skill development, and that is goal setting. So if you missed the last webinar where I talked about goal setting, you can go and take my free class on mindgames.gg. It's all about goal setting. But the thing that I emphasize there is that the first part of being self-aware, this is the biggest piece of advice I give to new athletes. You have to know your dream goal. Because what if the part of the staircase you're on is optional? Or what if your goal is actually something else? Or what if your goal is too low, or it might not even be real? Here's an example. So I had this idol when I was first married, and they were this family who they lived in a house in Michigan. They saved every penny. You know, they bought super cheap food with coupons. They never bought any new clothes. They had 3 kids. By the time that their kids were like 10 years old, they'd paid off their house, and they'd traveled to every single state in the United States, and they saved enough money to quit their jobs and travel around the world for a whole year. And I was like, wow, I want to be those people. That's awesome. So I set that goal. But I couldn't stop myself from buying furniture all the time and dishes. I was like, what the heck is wrong with me? I've got this goal. I want to save money so I can travel around the world. I keep going out and buying furniture. So it turns out my goal is not to take my family and save a bunch of money and travel around the world with them. It turns out my goal is to host people at my house and enjoy the community that I live in. So you have to make sure your idols and your goals are correctly separated. So you can use idols for inspiration. You can follow them sometimes, but you got to make sure they're your goals. So answer these questions to yourself. What is it you want to have? Like really, if you look at yourself as an adult in the future, what is it that you want to do? And who is it that you want to be? Those 3 questions. If you can line those up, then you can look at your daily steps to get there, and you can figure out if steps are optional or not. Let me give you another example of an esport athlete. So I was counseling this athlete. I was training him, and we were talking about goals. And it came out finally in the conversation that his goal was to be somewhere in esport as a brand. It wasn't necessarily like the LCS, the League Championship Series. He just wanted to be successful and playing the game. Okay, that changes everything, because if your goal is not to be an athlete, there's all sorts of ways to be successful now in esport. You can study sports psychology like me. You can be a coach. You can be a team manager. You can be a brand where you're streaming. You can start a team. You can form a company that sells peripherals and sponsor athletes. Like there's all these things you can do to be involved in the scene. So all of a sudden, steps that used to be necessary are optional. So if you fail at them, you can analyze the steps a little, and you can roll with the punches for the ones that are optional. But then you also know which ones you absolutely, essentially must succeed at, and you can throw yourselves at those goals over and over and over again until they yield, because you know that your life dream hinges on that. Okay, let me get to these 5 tips, and we'll go into the Q&A, and I can turn on my camera. So 5 practical tips you can do today to improve your game. These are the first 5 things I go over with all the pro athletes that I work with. Okay, number 1, play a real game every day. What do I mean by that? If you're playing a match in StarCraft, League of Legends, whatever your esport is, Dota, what happens after you lose a match, like badly, one of the first few matches of the day, so you still got lots of energy and stuff, and you just, either you make a mistake or your team makes a mistake or you lose. Usually, now this might not be true, you might have a different response, but usually people want to get right back in, play another game, and vindicate themselves. They want to like try again. They're like, oh, I don't want to screw up again. So they get back in, try to not screw up. Or, oh, I got such a junky team. I want to get a better team, or want to get a different role. They go and they re-queue. They play another game. They try to erase the one from their head. But that's not how it works. When you go play an actual sporting match, you have to live with the result, sometimes for weeks, sometimes for months, sometimes for your whole life. Sometimes you lose a crucial match, and that's it. Like your team is out, they bench you, you lose your position, and you never play pro again. Okay, so you playing a match in a professional setting versus playing a match in training, totally different. The matches in the professional setting actually train your mental skills, because part of the pressure of being in that match is that the results matter and you got to live with them. So every day, what I recommend to the athletes is at least one game should be real. That means that before the game, you prepare. You take 10 minutes set aside, and you get yourself mentally in the state of like role playing, like, okay, this is a real match. Okay, then you play it, and everything matters. And after the game, you live with the results. So you don't re-queue right away. You don't go play Xbox to get out of your head. Instead, you do what you would do to cope after a real match. So if you won, you go celebrate, talk to some people, you enjoy it, revel in it, take it in. You examine your play, find out where you screwed up. If you lost, you do the same thing. You go find your social support network and you work on building that up. This is a skill you need. All athletes need to be able to lose and still keep going. So this is something you can train every day, like going and finding those people who are going to support you when you lose. And then you go back to your play and you examine it and you say, what could I have done to win that game? So I recommend that you play a real game every day. Second thing I recommend is that you enter a game with workhorse goals. If you don't know what those are, go do my free training on my website, or go back and watch the last webinar that I did. Too often we go into a game with the goal to win, but that actually doesn't really help you develop. Like, what's the use of beating people who are slightly better or slightly worse than yourself? That doesn't get you anywhere. You have to be able to beat yourself every day. You have to improve yourself every day. The ladder climb is an illusion. It's just a ranking system. The only thing that matters is your own skill development. So every single game you go into, you need to have goals set up, like achievements essentially, that you're going to accomplish in order to improve your own play in a measurable way. And those are called workhorse goals. Go check them out. Okay, the third thing is become aware of your self-talk. Remember, like a couple slides ago, I talked about awareness, how important it is? There's all sorts of drills for training self-talk. But what we've found in sports psych is if we just make people aware of their own beliefs, they can figure out what works for them. They become the scientists. So here's a quick, dirty drill to get some awareness of your self-talk. You take two piles of coins, like pennies or nickels, you put them on your desk, and you push some to the right, some to the left. Okay, these are your functional self-talk and destructive self-talk. So self-talk that helps you win, beliefs that help you win, and beliefs that help you lose. And you play a game, and every single time you catch yourself saying something that's like not productive, that's not going to help you win, you move a penny to the other pile. And every time you catch yourself saying something or thinking something that is productive, you move a penny the other direction. So for example, God, that sucks. I'm so unlucky. Okay, that is pretty useless self-talk, because you're trying to base everything around luck. You're not recognizing that your opponent's skill level or your lack of preparation or all of these other things. Okay, so you move a penny one way. Another example of productive self-talk, on the other hand, would be like, okay, I just lost that trade. I got to focus. I can't lose the next one. So you state what happened. I didn't say it was your fault. You lost the trade. Maybe it was luck. Maybe it was his skill. Maybe it was your skill. It didn't matter. That's the fact. Then you say what it is that you need to do next. You got to win the next trade or else. So you're really focused on it. So that's productive self-talk, helps you win. So move those pennies back and forth. You become aware of what it is you're saying and thinking during the games. Okay. Sort out the controllables and the uncontrollables. This is a paper drill you can do right before a game. You take two pieces of paper and you label them controllables and uncontrollables, and you sort out what it is you can control in a match and what it is you can't control. Because you remember what I said at the beginning, you have a certain number of things you can focus on. You have a certain number of decisions that you can make in a day before you need to sleep in order to reset your hit points as far as focus goes. By the way, the studies show that about 6 hours is the amount of 100% focus that humans have in them for every day. So if you work or go to school all day and you're super focused on what you're doing, then you come home to train, you're going to be in a bit of trouble as far as effectiveness. So you got to start automating parts of your day, like try to automate some of your classes, try to automate your morning routine, do the same thing every morning so you don't have to focus on it, you don't have to make decisions. That frees up your mind for the training in the afternoon. Okay, back to my point. Write down on a sheet everything that you can control in the match, and write down on a sheet everything you can't control. It'll really help you focus on what it is that you can do to bring about perfection in your play. Okay, finally, I wanted to include something to do outside the game, because people are always asking me, like, what can I do besides League of Legends to get better? Or what can I do besides Dota or StarCraft or CSGO? This is the biggest recommendation I have. Let me tell you why. If you look at the most successful athletes of all time, so we're talking like Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods, one of the attributes they have is that they live their sport. When they're on the court, they're totally in it. But when they're off the court, they're always thinking about it. They're always strategizing. They're watching people's videos. They're thinking about their own play. They're thinking about the next training they're going to do. They're planning on how they're going to counter, the opponent they're coming up against next. Doing yoga is like one of those things that helps you live your sport, because when you do yoga, you have to do these things that are called stretches. Let me explain a little physically what's happening here. You're actually not stretching. The muscle, when you reach out to touch your toes, contracts out of self-protection. It says, I don't want to break, so I'm going to contract. When you get like more flexible, quote unquote, and every day you can reach farther and farther towards your toes, you're not actually stretching anything out. What you're doing is raising your tolerance for pain. You're training your muscles to relax a little bit and let you reach farther. Yes, there are people that stretch out their tendons, but did you know that's actually an injury? That's actually a bad thing. So most Ashtanga yoga teachers, of which I'm one, will tell you how to do the poses so that you don't stretch your tendons, because that's not the goal here. The goal is to endure the pain and train your muscles to relax so that you can reach farther. Now, this is the same kind of focus that's required in a sports match, this kind of focus and retraining of habits in your muscles. So this is a transferable skill. It's something that you can use back and forth. Likewise, athletes like Michael Jordan practice mindfulness. They play in the moment. They're always like in the zone, as it were. And in yoga, you enter that state a lot of the time, and especially at the end when you do your final meditation afterwards. So you get this feeling that you are able to take over into the game and replicate, and that's why I recommend yoga as a really good thing to do, like aside from training. Of course, the number one thing I do recommend is practicing your sport. Like that's above and beyond the most important thing. But if you want to do something outside the game and you want to develop transferable skills, then something like very, very like mental in your head that's also healthy physically is yoga. And by the way, this is really good for your pre-performance routine. Like if you become really good at yoga, you can amp up your emotions. You can get yourself like really physically burning before a match, and it really helps with the nerves. I want to end on this quote because it sums up basically what sports psych training is all about. Like I can educate you and you can be excited to do it, but it doesn't really matter unless you can work together to apply it and if you do it. The sad thing with esports right now is that we don't have the same infrastructure as traditional sport. You have to develop yourself without a coach this is something that no other athlete has to endure except for like football players in the third world. You know, they often don't have coaches, but they always have people in the village that are really good at football, you know, so at least they have somebody they can learn from. So you have to be your own coach, and that's what makes this really difficult. It means that you have to be smart enough and reflective enough to see your own play and to fix it. And that's not an easy thing to do. So you got to be able to forgive yourself a lot for all the mistakes you're going to make, because all the other pro athletes out there, they had coaches from the time that they were like 6 years old doing all the hard work, you know, watching their play and telling them what they were doing wrong and helping them fix it. And now you have to do this for yourself. So that's one of the reasons it's so challenging. But you can take motivation from Bruce Lee because he pretty much trained himself. Okay, so you can go to mindgames.gg and you can check out all of my free classes on there. You can also, I've got a free class on self-talk. I just launched it. It's a 3-part series. It comes to your email inbox. You can also make an account and log in and just do it all at once if you don't want to wait for the emails to arrive. And that'll teach you everything you need to know about the basics of self-talk and how to control your beliefs so that you can be more effective in game. And now I want to do Q&A with you guys. So if you could, you can either email me questions at Weldon at mindgames.gg, and I'll open those up in a sec, or you can use the Q&A app here, which I just opened, which says it's disabled. Ah, shoot. How do I enable it?